We're ready to 10x. We're ready to 50x. We're ready to 100x. That's way easier said than done. What are we going to not do? What are we going to do more of? What are we going to stop doing? The more you can be granular with these reflections, the faster you will grow and the more you will understand the market. All right, so I want to continue on my early stage founder episodes. On this one, I want to iterate on the operating system for early stage founders. I've had many conversations with founders between 0 and 10 million annual recurring revenue in the last month and lots of learnings. This is last week's article, an early stage founder operating system. What we're going to do in this session is basically go through the core ideas and build a map that makes sense together, going through how to get out of the early stage. And so what does that mean? Early stage to me is like between 1 million and 2 million annual recurring revenue. How do you get out of that? It's not by making tons of sales. It can be, but it will break if you just do that. It's not by just having solid ops. You need other things, but it's related. So that's where from last week's post, we have like that chaos to multiplayer, which is chaos, map, blueprint, multiplayer. Based on the styles of founders and the kind of companies that you're doing, you'll have definitely edge cases and differences. Here, we might want to focus a bit more on B2B SaaS because I think it's more adopted, but we can go into edge cases easily. So regarding the map, I think that's one of the cornerstones of this week because last week we reviewed that template. I explained the 5 ICP clients. What do I mean by getting out of that zone? So a quick note on this is that because I mentioned that 1 million to 2 million annual recurring revenue, I think that this number is a sweet spot where going over that without a strong foundation is hard, doable definitely, but the goal is to create an engine, a multiplier, because you're building with technology. So you're not scaling a service, you're not scaling an agency, which would have a linear growth, and you would have a plan to hire, a plan to improve processes as things becomes more complex and there are more people in the organization. Because in the end, you want the biggest organization, or at least the fastest moving organization with minimum complexity, maximum leverage, and multiplier in the growth and revenue and visions. So basically, you don't want incremental, you want compounding. The point of this series of early stage founder is how do you get out of that 1 million to 2 million annual recurring revenue in a methodical, practical way without chaos, without uncertainty. And what I like about the early stage founder mindset is that a lot of people believe that it's just luck and that you need to find something that actually makes sense, where in reality, I would frame that it's just a matter of how do you balance the learning velocity as well as the quality of your decisions. So let's start here. I think we'll spend 20 minutes on this episode and then 20 minutes on the next one. This is a kind of rhythm. I would love any questions, any future requests for connecting these concepts. And I want to draw this live. So it's kind of a raw session where we just reflect on that together and iterate week over week. So last week, this was this episode. And I will just grab that image because I think it's compelling and it's simple. So I'll put it here. Here we have a map and a blueprint. So those to me are very important. And I'm going to come back on it right now. And from this one, I actually want to grab the idea of learning velocity and quality of the decisions. So you have like the system one, the learning engine. So I think I'm just going to create here the first 2, which is the learning engine. And the system 2 is the quality of decision. Those are like our 2 foundations for the early stage visibility. And that comes next from that series. So one of the core questions that came here is, okay, you want to add predictability in your early stage, chaotic, uncertain phase. And you want to do a few things. You want to leave that place in minimum time. That means over 2 million ARR, for example. And the other things that you want to do is that you want to build systems that will not only increment in a linear way, but maybe like 10x to 100x. So how do you do that? This has different components. You have the ops, operations, you have the product, you might have the engineering, you might have legal. Depending on the kind of business, you have multiple complexities of that. So if you just build a revenue engine, congratulations, you've built an agency or a service or a consulting company, which is great. And you can always productivize that as long as you have an expertise and you're focused on a mission and an ICP. Mission and ICP, I think, are very core to the experiment of early stage because it reflects the big picture. So I guess we would have something like that. You have a mission in ICP, and then this connects to those. I just want to mention here that the mission and the ICP are dynamic. What is a mission and an ICP that are static? That would be, hey, I have a business ID. It's A. This is my model, and I'm going to just do that for the next 10 years. I'm not going to change the mission and the ideal customer profile. Actually, I'm just going to add ideal customer profile. So that would be like an ICP. And the reason I mentioned it's dynamic is because we touched on the first one, which is a learning engine, based on the real world informations, meaning client calls, user calls, engineering calls, operation calls, any pieces of signal that comes from your company actually impacts that mission. It either confirms that this is the right mission, or it shows you that there are nuances of things that you were not aware of when you created that strategy that you might want to consider or like take into consideration. So here I'm going to go to the revenue vector map of last week. That one is quite simple and easy to understand. You have the chaos revenue and you have the ICP revenue. So what does that mean? When you have revenue entering early stage, so maybe you will reach the 2 million mark, but how much of this revenue is actually something that is benefiting your systems and the blueprint that is going to allow you a multiplier in your growth in the next 6 months, 12 months, 24 months versus just revenue that adds complexity and doesn't add compounding value. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to only have retainers. It doesn't mean that you have to build a perfect product that can just be reused over and over and over, and you just have to focus on growth and scale. Reality is not perfect. We know that. So sometimes you must take some chaos revenue to allow to understand better the ICP revenue. The counterintuitive thing here is that ICP revenue is theoretical, but the reality, you will need of both, and you will need to take bets, and your bets will be wrong, and you will learn. Which is why it's so important to have the learning engine, which is how do you consistently learn and improve on your decision making so that you can build the best system that will get you over 2 million annual recurring revenue, as well as creating a multiplier for your organization and how the information flows to make sure that you're allocating resources efficiently as well as taking the best decisions. In the decision engine, the actual connection for decision is resource allocation. You only have a scarce amount of time to execute. So you can have a million strategies and a million ideas. Because you're scarce in resources, you cannot execute on all of them. So you need to pick your best bets over and over again. And you want to validate them. You want to validate as soon as possible some core and foundational pieces that you can build on top of. So the risk here is that a founder might find himself or herself in a place where you're creating revenue, trying to push it hard in a direction where you show results. Maybe you have some investors and other people involved, and you're not investing in that multiplier, which is basically how you're thinking ahead of what is the end game of what I'm trying to build. And you need to balance both. So that's why resource allocation needs to pick a very few amounts of bets that you have. And you need to know from those bets what needs to happen for me to have learned something that I didn't know. And what are the most important things that I need to learn to reach faster my making revenue over 2 million annual recurring revenue and my systems. So what do I need to learn? What are the most efficient way to learn those in the minimum period of time? And this is kind of the core idea behind that one. So I think that we've mapped a clear picture of where we're at with that piece and this one. In the early stage, this is a lot about the core system that one can use at this stage to create that learning engine and to create that decision-making engine. I'm just going to extend on the learning engine, and then I will do the decision engine as the next step of this one. The learning engine has a few pieces. One thing that I show here on that specific substack are like the metrics by department. So you want to be data driven? Yes. And the reason I mention this is because most of the time, when you're building a learning engine, we think of A/B testing, we think of dashboards, we think of data system. When you have a heavy data background, you might understand this as building something complex or having ETLs or all these kind of things, but it can actually be very simple. So maybe you can just put a metabase on top of your Postgre application that you deploy locally and that connects to your production database. What you can do is build week over week and month over month views. You can do that also for finance. And so now you've gamified your early stage to what is happening weekly and monthly, and what do I want to see happen this week, this month to learn X, Y, Z. What do I want to see happening? So let's say you're delivering a specific service through an agent and you have 10 clients. They are not perfect clients. They do not represent your perfect ICP, meaning that they are perfect for your mission. They are perfect in terms of the business that they have. And also they're paying you market price, not like a friend discount price or like an early stage price that does not show what I would call a proper good ICP, like your strategic partners, basically. The 5 that I recommend to build your blueprints from on the early stage phase. So simple example, you have the metabase week over week, month over month. What do I want to see happening this week, this month to learn X, Y, Z? So that comes back to the actual ICP mission. And so you have your ICP mission that goes there, and we're going to make it sideways because this is an iteration. So monthly, quarterly, yearly, especially if you're very early, maybe it will be monthly. You have a strategy, and then week over week, you set a number of experiments. And so when I say experiments, I'm not saying be a scientist. It can be very concrete, like reach out to 100 people this week of that specific profile using Sales Navigator and Phantom and maybe Apollo, and with a specific message of introduction, and see what happens on the 4 weeks of the month and track that experiment. So what does tracking that experiment means here from a sales perspective? I will just break this one for now. I will say that being data driven doesn't have to be around engineering and product. So I'll just add engineering and I will add product, and we can go on and on. But the point being that likely if you're early stage, what needs to be working when you're building technology is that you have like the sales and the product and engineering very well aligned. The sales retroactively give visibility to the ICP and mission. And so like validating the bets that you've made. So like the assumption that you're doing of the need that you're offering in the market reflects the numbers of calls and meetings and revenue generated from what you're pitching in those calls. And that is being data driven about an assumption. This is my assumption. This is how I'm going to see if people react to it. I'm going to contact this kind of profiles with this kind of message. They should resonate with that. I should have a conversion of message introduction on LinkedIn to follow up to first call of 40%, and first call from second call to third call of 5%. And from here, this remaining, I would close 50% or something. This is just an example of like the sales side. And that needs to be tracked week over week, month over month. One way that you can start doing things early stage. So why is this so important and how does it connect to the big picture again? When you're doing the chaos to multiplier thing, when we say map, this is where we want inputs and outputs. And most of time, early stage is very chaotic and uncertain. You have kind of an idea, but your idea evolves a lot. The thing that is going to make you leave the 2 million annual recurring revenue zone is actually how well do you understand that map and the reality around you so that you can do pattern identification and pattern utilization. And when you do that, this is where you can build blueprints and multipliers, because then you know how many people do you need to hire, how to structure the team around the core thing that you're delivering, how to build the product and the next feature that would deliver maximum value for the current existing client, that would grow revenue, but not stretch complexity, and all these kind of little trade-offs. So that's why you need so badly a map. Okay, So week over week, month over month, if you connect that to the idea of the sales, it's kind of what I described. And that should be tracked week over week, month over month with metrics. What are we trying? What's the experiment going on? What are we going to try next month and this quarter, etc., etc. Same thing for engineering. Engineering and product are interesting because the product is actually how do we align the sales vision that we're pitching and selling to the actual value delivered. So if you just think simply, that's it. If you have those and you know how to execute, all the other things fall behind. But you can sell the most compelling vision. If you cannot deliver on it, you will fail it and you will lose trust from your clients, etc. If you have the best product in the world, but you don't know how to frame it and what problem it's solving and to whom you're solving this and how big of a problem is this to solve in the first place, you're also going to lose. Now, this is a point about early stage. You don't have to have all the answers and you can take your time to get those answers. But you must have a clear path, methodical, that reduces uncertainty and chaos to an exact solution of what that could look like and a plan of how are you going to figure this out. That connection here, that might be like the most important piece of early stage. And so when you talk to investors, you cannot say that you will be there in 6 months. You can have estimates. And if you know a whole lot what you're doing and you have 40 years of expertise doing a very specific thing, you can have a strong sense of that, a strong intuition. But what you can control is how many learning cycles do you actually run through to validate and develop that actual map here so that you can build easily the blueprint. Because let's face it, if you have to drive and you cannot see the road nor the different directions you can go, it's likely that you're going to crash. You can get the car repaired and we put you back on the road and you continue to drive. Maybe you go a bit more ahead, but then you crash again. So the entire point is that as you unlock this map, it's like you're gaining more and more visibility on how to drive. So maybe the vision will be very blurry, but it's better than not seeing anything as a driver, right? And so I think this is my best attempt to do the analogy of the learning engine. The more you complete the cycles on what would be the most important thing for you to learn in the shortest period of time so that you have more clarity on the road and the better you know where you're going in the first place. So now you develop a better vision, but also a better sense of where you want to go. And now it becomes an execution problem where you just need to figure out that maybe you need to grab your car to take a boat because you need to go somewhere else, or maybe there is actually a plane. And now you have different vehicles to fly at different pace based on what you've tested, what worked and what didn't, and your assumptions that you've been iterating on. And so now you can be more or less assertive towards the strategy of the company and aggressive in the implementation. So like, let's say you validated all the learnings that you needed with your current experience to grow from 10 million to 100 million. That can do it. And so now you can go and raise and have a way more aggressive than just validating month over month revenue. Awesome. So we're almost done, I think, for this episode. Now you understand that this is the operating system. You have a map and you need to convert that map and the blueprint so that you can convert it into a multiplayer. You do this by having the learning engine and the decision engine. I'm going to comment this one now, but it's going to go fast, at least I think. And you have a week over week, month over month rhythm where week over week, you look for how much are we putting out? So how many calls are we having? How many features are we shipping? How many learnings are we getting? And so you can get a sense of how good are we at executing on getting those learnings in and validating the vision that we have. On the monthly, of course, you want to look at revenue. You want to look at what the product is actually doing, what are next steps. And so as you build that, you're building the learning engine. And for the resource allocation decision engine, using this with AI and with the vision across the entire company with a maximum context, minimum friction, which I'll get more in the next episode, that is where you get the resource allocation power. Because if you're tracking all the sales calls transcripts, and if you're tracking all the user calls transcripts, there is strong signals that can collapse here, and using your mission and your existing strategy, which also is dynamic. So you should have like a versioning of how your strategy evolves through time. Ideally, you don't have to do it perfectly, but Ideally, you should be able to explain your current understanding of the company's vision. So now you can pattern identify between what's happening on the sales and engineering and product and customer, etc., etc. And so by doing this, you can reflect on the next month or the next quarter or the next semester, depending on where you're at on this early stage phase. What are we going to not do? What are we going to do more of? What are we going to stop doing so that we can learn faster and we can take the best decisions that will eventually get us out of that early stage zone, but also generating that multiplier, unlocking those 5 core ideal customer profile clients that will tell us, okay, we're ready to 10x, we're ready to 50x, we're ready to 100x. So that's way easier said than done. But having a framework like that and a mental model, I believe, should really help structuring the resource allocation. How many people are we? What are the skill sets that we have with the people that we have and the mission and what we're trying to solve? And maybe there are right bets in your strategy, but not the right one for the kind of team that you currently have. Or you can have specific plans, but with the resources, you will need more runaway or being more aggressive to compete on one strategy or the other. And so the more you can be granular with these reflections, the best resource allocation and the best learnings and the faster you will grow and the more you will understand the market. And the cool thing is that it's transversal. So if you understand better reality, it doesn't only apply to your sector. You can also duplicate, reuse this pattern identification that you've gotten on other industries, other verticals and horizontals. For example, the size of the company being one factor. Then you have like all the different vertical inside of a company, the departments. But you have many more verticals and horizontals that you can think of that allows you to expand that pattern identification and utilization, and eventually pattern creation too. So that's where you start creating your own patterns to generate more revenue and utilize how reality works to make something that grow even faster. So I think that's enough for this episode. We've covered all of that. I would love to know if you guys have any questions, if I can enter any of these topics in giving more perspective or details or explain myself better on any of that. And I will see you on the next one. On this one, we're going to cover the AI native company, or at least what does that mean for me. So I'll see you there and thank you for your time. Ciao, ciao.